So it's my pleasure to also introduce our partners on the study, which was IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, which is a UN fund based in Rome, and they focus on investing in rural people, addressing food insecurity and rural poverty. So now it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce a speaker, our honored guest, His Excellency Minister Abdisalam Omar, who's the current Minister of Foreign Affairs and Investment Promotion of the Federal Republic of Somalia. Dr. Omar is the former Senior Associate at the Horn Economic and Social Policy Institute, Governor of the Central Bank of Somalia, and has held senior consultancy positions with World Bank, United Nations, and the Somali government. Dr. Omar has served as the Program Manager for Governance and Financial Services at UNDP in Somalia, and is former Chief of Staff to Mayor Anthony A. Williams of the District of Columbia. So we'll hear a few comments from the Minister. Minister Omar.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. I want to say to myself, welcome home to home. I came from home and I am home, and I guess I'm very lucky and delighted to be both Somali and an American. It's really enormous pleasure and an honor to be addressing you all about the subject that I'm very much passionate about it, and receive quite strange questions and criticism. Why one want to spend invest in Somalia? I am also honored that I'm speaking at an event where Somalia and its innovative diaspora and investment are the key terms and themes. I didn't think I would see in my lifetime that where George Washington University, a premier university around the world, where by the way, I have allegiance to this university because my daughter went to school without walls here at the university. And when I was Chief of Staff, we worked very hard with the Foggy Bottom community to build a new hospital and the new building. So this is a great institution. And I'm glad to be here again for the second time in 2 months at in this building. So there is really an innovative way here, where this remarkable effort and a foresight for bridging between the gap between speculation and evidence-based and policy-making decisions. So there is always speculation. We don't have a data, we don't have this, but that data is coming along today, and it will make decisions better. So for the organizers and the authors of this Somali Diaspora Investment Survey, please let's give them a big hand. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and you have done something that needed to be done. Across the Somali government, the need to create conducive environment to attract foreign investment has been placed at the center of all socio-economic and development policies. Engaging the Somali diaspora to achieve our social and economic goals is also one of the key pillars of the recently and first ever cabinet adopted Somali foreign policy. I think most of you have a copy to see that, and this is the book. From this, it's clear the importance of our government and people attached to both investment and diaspora. Why invest in Somalia? I have been asked many times. Are you mad telling us to invest in Somalia? Truly, I think I'm not mad. I'm a very savvy businessman who want people to come and invest in my country. The answer, I find it absolutely surprising all the time, that question I should say. This is because there is so much opportunity everywhere, including in land, at sea, and in the air. You can invest anywhere you want in Somalia. A test of this assertion is to observe and recognize the success of the early Somali diaspora investors who returned and are now seeing their business grow annually. Their success has brought many more diaspora with the skills, capital, ambition back to Somalia to strengthen public and private institutions, revolutionize product and service markets, and provide much-needed service to both the people and the government, including ordering pizza in the middle of the night in Mogadishu, and you will get good one. Another success story is that foreign investors are inquiring more and more about investing in Somalia's key priority area, such as agriculture, energy, fishery, infrastructure, just to name a few. Many others, especially those from far away, such as Turkey, are already on the ground and making profits while transferring new skills, technology, and creating employment of our people and hope for our society. And not to forget, Lee and I are roommates when he's in Mogadishu, almost roommates. Don't sleep the same room, separate rooms. Truly, that's right. We have no choice but see each other all the time. I'm proud to say that Somalia is one of the most beautiful countries on earth. The Somali people are among the most friendliest, resilient, and welcoming to all groups. Looking around, I do not believe I need to work hard to convince many of you of this, as either Somali Americans or you have felt the restless energy and the entrepreneurial spirit, and that's why you're here this morning. To complement the energy and the determination of the people, Somalia is blessed with untapped natural resources, with limited investment in most cases, can both transform Somalia's economic future while creating wealth. There's nothing for free, while creating wealth for investors. What does Somalia offer? It's my absolute pleasure to inform you that Somalia's potential is boundless. Somalia has the longest coast in Africa, one of the most reliable broadband in the Horn of Africa, 8.9 million hectares of arable land, a young and increasingly educated workforce, and is a world leader in livestock. In addition, Somalia has one of the best wind-sun radiation in the world. According to the IMF, the economy grew by 3.7%, and the GDP is estimated to be $6 billion, which is 4 times more than it was before the collapse. The foreseeable future, the economy will stabilize, and many of the estimated 2 million diaspora return to invest in their motherland. With these enormous untapped resources mentioned earlier, Somalia has the potential to be a world leader in renewable energy, fishing, agriculture, ICT, and livestock. Furthermore, its strategic location in the Gulf of Aden, it has the potential to return to its former glory and a gateway for trade, commerce, and logistics by connecting lucrative markets in the Middle East and the Far East. Somalia's economic potential is boundless. Dreams of growth, prosperity, and reaching, penetrating new markets can easily be a reality for all investors. What's desperately needed is to unleash all this economic energy and opportunity, and we need investment. Somalia, as a recovering post-conflict state, have some challenges. With entrepreneurial spirit, investors would quickly and easily define as opportunity. What most people think that is a problem is an opportunity for a savvy investor. The Somali diaspora is familiar with most of these challenges. Almost of all the different groups who are working hard in Somalia to improve the situation in Somalia further enable investment for sustainable development in all sectors. In all sectors, infrastructure is important and a national priority. The construction of this fundamental economic enabler, especially roads, will not connect opportunities across Somalia, but it will give birth to new supply chain-linked activities. In addition, since most investors also have interest in other Horn of Africa neighboring states, investment in Somalia infrastructure and priority sectors will increase profitability while bringing the cost of doing business right down. These lucrative opportunities in new and old international competitive industries and sectors will create additional profits and accelerate Somalia's national progress in all forms. Our message is clear. Somalia is open for business. Somalia is open for business, and the government is committed to making doing business in Somalia easier and profitable. As I stated earlier, investment is central to our national economic development. And while we are grateful for the aid support we receive, and we're still receiving, and it should keep coming, we feel that the traditional aid model does not work, specifically if we want to ensure a long-term national development and prosperity. Somalia's foreign policy puts investment and diaspora engagement at the heart of our national endeavor. The Parliament and the Cabinet endorsed investment law that stipulates the best possible investment environment and must be nurtured to offer best opportunities to all investors. This is the clearest sign that our government is making every effort to further enhance the investment environment so that the rich resources of our country and our land can be maximized for the benefit of our people, nation, and investors. Investment opportunities in Somalia are vast. They are potentially lucrative, with the sole aim of furthering aiding actual potential investors. The Somali government has devised priority projects booklet and an informational investment brochure, and both of them, I think, are here. This is the SOM Invest, and this is the priority book. So please take a look at it, and you will have some good ideas. And Lee has more of this information to share with you. Somalia, and as I have said, I'm not confusing. No. Pardon me. I'm excited, so I kind of messed it up my page. Yeah. Investing in Somalia provides the perfect opportunity to combine both to fulfill the crucial corporate social responsibility obligation while genuinely making a social difference and profit in Somalia for investors. The Somali diaspora already send more remittance to their families than the people of Somalia ever receive in aid from international community, and their investments will take this one step further. While remittances have been, and to some extent remain, the lifeline of many Somalis, the situation on the ground has changed. And the population is better educated, the country is safer. Now is the time for the Somali diaspora to transform the remittance into investment on the ground. I am sure you will all agree it's better to teach a person to fish than just to provide a fish to them daily. So there are good examples around the world, and I'm sure George Washington knows about this in the Dominican Republic, in Philippines, where remittances have been turned into investment and reaches most of the community. The Somali diaspora have benefited enormously from globalization. We are very much through technology and trade interconnected. The Somali diaspora must realize that the Somali investment policy actively encourages partnership between themselves and other companies for the purpose of investment. So I say, bring your friends, ideas, and create lasting hope, progress, and profitability in Somalia. Invest in hope. I welcome the findings of the Somali Diaspora Investment Survey, which was conducted in partnership by truly committed experts and Somali diaspora. I assure you, we all understand the issue. We are committed to enhancing those remaining, such as further banking reform, data collection to inform investment. In fact, in both areas, we are working closely with the international financial institutions like the World Bank, and we have approached the UN Commission for Africa to assist in market data collection to determine the strength and capability of our resources and economy. More than waiting for numbers on paper, I strongly urge you to visit Somalia anywhere you like, Hargeisa, Mogadishu, Garowe, Adado, anywhere you like. within the territory and research opportunities on the ground. I'm confident you will all be pleased with the abundance of opportunity you find. Seeing is believing. There is much that you will see that you will certainly believe in investing. Moreover, given the centrality of the investment in our national policy to develop Somalia, we are not going to leave anything by chance. The opportunities are so abundant. A friend of mine, a diplomat from the Arab country, one time asked me, he said, Minister, I hear that the Somali fish dies for old age. And it's true. So come and fish, buy fish, eat fish, sell fish, and please do that. And Lee can tell you more about it. The unregulated, illegal, and fishing project that they have. May I suggest, and I will close at this, that the best pension I can plan for me is the best service, both of us and the fish, is to fish more. Eat them. Make a social and economic contribution in the process. The story of Somalia's fish best illustrates the fact that if ever there is a genuine win-win economic partnership, it's no doubt it's in Somalia. Welcome with open arms to your future opportunities and wealth, and invest in hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can we get a quick picture? I want to thank the Minister for showing up. It's been a very, very busy time. There's a delegation in town. The President is here, and so they have other appointments they need to slip off to. But I want to say, Shuraako has facilitated over 70 investments in country in the last 2.5 years. We're pushing well over $6 million, have worked in partnership with the local banks. We've hosted the Investment Forum in Nairobi, Renewable Energy Forum in Hargeisa. We have committed to doing an investment forum in Mogadishu in the summer and in the fall in Hargeisa. Somalia is open for business, and we can attest to that.
Well, thank you. We have seen a lot, so listen to him. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for helping so much.
Sure. Oh,
yes. I'll see you.
I'll see you.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So a couple things in terms of framing where Somalia is right now. The foreign minister is a hard act to follow, for sure. He's passionate. And when we sit in Mogadishu and we have conversations tonight over dinner, believe me, the conversation gets going, and ideas are really flowing. But the security situation is improving, and it's becoming more stable in pockets, and it is continually improving. In spite of the popular story, there is a lot going on there to increase stability. There is active transition from aid dependence through a policy addressing foreign investment, as he mentioned, the Soma Invest, priority investments, et cetera. The GDP is growing. The efforts of the administration to relieve sovereign debt are well underway. There's also a job creation priority through private sector investment, critical for sustainable and inclusive growth. So an estimated 67% of 14 to 29-year-olds are unemployed. So it's critical. This gets to some of the de-risking issues that happen with remittances and the international community or international institutions having difficulty with remitting funds that get to investment. That's very critical. So the private sector is constrained by lack of a mature financial services sector, and the de-risking threatens. And then the last slide, remittances are about 24% of GDP. Beyond funding consumption, they also fund businesses. And so we need to look at this very seriously. Businesses are becoming more sophisticated. They're shifting from traditional approaches to more formal approaches, which makes them more eligible for due diligence and foreign direct investment. It's a lot of what we focus on. And then globally, we know, this isn't something that we have a hunch on, we know the diaspora are patriotic investors, particularly post-conflict. They understand the context. We think we could help them understand it better with better information. But globally, there are about 2 million Somali diaspora out there that are potential investors. So with that, I'm going to shift over and introduce Dr. Lindsay Hager, who was the lead researcher on this project. She is with the One Earth Future Foundation Research and Development Department. And so she'll go through the goals and objectives methodology, and then I'll go through quickly the recommendations, and then we'll go to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Lee. After the comments of the foreign minister, I feel like the next time we do this, we ought to be doing it in the evening and eating fish instead of corner bakery items. Hopefully we'll get to a point where that is possible. I certainly feel like it would be based on my experience doing this research project, which was really, really one of the most interesting partnerships. We have partners in education, obviously, government, NGOs, civil society. It was really quite an inclusive project, and it's very exciting to be up here presenting the results and some of the preliminary recommendations that we have from this survey with you all today. So thank you very much for coming. I'd like to acknowledge there's actually 4 authors on this report. I am one, Lee is one, Alex Wise, who is standing in the back of the room, who has been pivotal in organizing a lot of this, is also one, and Jay Benson, who's couldn't join us today, but he's in Colorado, is sending us well wishes. So what I'd like to do, Lee gave you a bit of the context. I'd like to talk to you a bit about the SDIS, the Somali Diaspora Investment Survey. I'll talk to you about the goal, the aims, some of the methods that we use to approach some of the questions we had, and then very, very quickly, some of the basic findings. It's a long report, or it's shaping up to be a long report. We're going to go through this fairly fast, and then I'll turn it back to Lee, who will talk about our preliminary recommendations, and that's primarily the material that we'll stay on today. After Lee and I are done, we have a panel of experts who will discuss how their experiences square with the report and our findings, and we'll add more color to what we present to you today. So, where did we start off? Well, we started off knowing that diaspora are very, very important, right? Diaspora populations around the world increase FDI flows between countries, they increase trade, they increase philanthropy, right? And of course, we cannot think about diaspora without also talking about remittances. In 2014, it was estimated that there were somewhere around, I think it was $518 billion in remittances worldwide. In the Somali context, it is estimated that there is more than $1 billion in remittances flowing between the diaspora populations around the world into the Somali regions. This is a really important, crucial group of people that we see with really amazing ability to tap into financial flows that will help better the Somali region. What we wanted to find out, though, is what is their motivation for sending money back? Why are they doing that? Can we harness that? And then also, what sort of financial products can we create that will help facilitate the flow of these funds? In order to get at these issues, we, in social sciences, use something called a mixed methods approach, which is basically a way of saying we tried to ask some of these questions in a number of different ways. The first thing we tried to do is understand the dynamics or the narrative on the ground, meaning that we can do a large N survey. We do those often. We talk about those a lot. Those have pluses and benefits. But if we really want to know the nuts and bolts about, sort of the story and what's going on, we have to really talk to individuals. So we conducted a series of 11 focus groups in 8 cities around the world, Europe, Africa, the US. We also conducted key interviews with individuals from these communities, and we tried to tap into individuals who we thought represented all of the Somali community, diaspora communities around the world. Then we tried to take what we knew, what we found out in the focus groups, and verify whether we could find global trends using a large survey instrument. It's an online survey we administered for about 20 days between July and August of last year. There were around 50 questions or so, and we had quite a good response. We had a number of countries represented. Let me tell you just quickly a little bit about the demographics. We had over 30 countries represented. The ones up here are just the most frequent countries. In terms of who responded, we have folks generally from the ages of 16 to 77. The average age is 39. Most of these individuals were married. Most of them were men. Most of them also had children. About a quarter of them were homeowners, and nearly 90% were born in Somalia. And they were born in sort of all regions of Somalia, if you break that down a bit further. Again, I'm giving you a very basic snapshot of some of this stuff, but we can go into more detail as we go through today. Now, one thing that the survey allowed us to do was to really dig into who are the investors, right? And so of the diaspora population who identified as investors, we're able to think a little bit about who are they, how old are they, where are they from? And so what we found out is that many of those people who identify as Somali investors are actually also active investors in their countries of residence. These are fairly sophisticated investors, and they're looking for opportunities across a number of different places. Many are investing as Somali business owners, right? They own businesses in Somalia, and as in that sort of situation, they are actually investing in their own businesses and in other opportunities across Somalia. Most are from the US, Sweden, UK, Canada, Denmark, and Kenya. In terms of the kind of what we call overrepresented populations, those are from the UK and Canada, which means that we have more investors in those places than we would sort of think match the typical population distribution. Now, what we heard in the focus groups was that investments tend to range from 5K to 100K. Most of them are in the 5 to 50K range. Now, what I've put up here is a snapshot of the sectors that individuals identified as being key for their investments or as being exciting opportunities. As you can see, the top, I don't know if you can read that in the back, but it's agriculture, real estate, education, so on and so forth. These are the sectors that individuals identified as the most exciting places for investment currently. Now, we also were able to ask investors what matters, what sort of factors facilitate investment, and what we heard over and over again is that trust matters, interpersonal trust, right? And that means that a lot of these individuals are really heavily reliant on their family, to a certain extent their friends, and to a certain extent their business partners. And that sort of interpersonal trust between those individuals is what is facilitating a lot of the investment that is going back and forth between diaspora populations and the Somali regions. In addition to understanding who these investors are, we asked about a number of different investment vehicles. Now, on this slide, I'm showing you 4, though we asked about a number of other ones. Starting on the right-hand side, this is the distribution of preferences for direct investment, co-investment, mutual funds, and buying publicly available shares. So you can see that primarily people are interested in direct investment and co-investment schemes. Now, we can break this apart, right, because we have all this interesting demographic data. We can break this apart and look at how, say, remitters feel about these sorts of investment vehicles, which could be something that's very, very important if we think that individuals who are remitting regularly are interested in indeed shifting their remittances into investments, which is also something that we did hear occasionally in these focus groups, that people who are sending remittances would be really excited about changing those remittances into an investment flow that creates more sustainable opportunities on the ground in Somalia. One thing that's interesting is that remitters and members of the diaspora actually view co-investment as a more interesting strategy than the other ones. So as you can see, we could break this apart in a number of different ways and get at very sort of specific details or specific subpopulations and their particular preferences over these investment vehicles. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that we're interested in motivations. We really want to know why it is that people are sending money back, right? Traditionally, it's been the form of remittances. We're also interested in why are investors doing this? What do they see on the ground? And the foreign minister mentioned there's a lot of profit potential, and that is what we heard over and over again, that there's quite a bit of profit potential, but there are a number of other things that are driving investment in Somalia. One is that people are excited about maximizing what we call social benefit, which means bettering the communities where they are sending the investment. People are also very excited, I don't have this up here, but when the report comes out, you'll be able to dig into this a bit more. They're very excited about the idea of using investment to go home, to move home, right? Because what we see over and over again from folks is that they want to go home. They're talking about going home, and they could use investment to facilitate that sort of a move. And so investment in that light takes on sort of a bigger meaning, and you could tell, or you can see where it is that very basic You can see the very basic potential for investment to help move people from one country to another, to help better communities in Somalia, and to provide the profit that is necessary to really engage people from outside of the country in the Somali opportunities on the ground. Finally, I'll wrap up here and then I'm going to give this to Lee. As I mentioned, we were able to ask folks about obstacles to investment. And this is something that I think a number of people, or in the popular story, right, is that you can't invest in Somalia, it's too risky, or there are too many obstacles. What we found is that, in fact, people are very excited about investing in Somalia, and but that there are some very real obstacles that currently exist. Going from left to right, or excuse me, from right to left, as you look at this, one of the biggest obstacles is political instability, right? That actually can take on a number of different specific meanings. Institutional instability, unable to have sort of trust and confidence in institutions that you and I would have trust in here for more localized investments. Security in Somalia, lack of the contract enforcement in Somalia, these sorts of things matter, and if we can do things to help the institutions there grow, what we think will happen is that we will start to see a very, very large amount of investment sort of flowing into the country, flowing into a number of communities that really will benefit from this sort of transaction. Now, how do we do that? We create better financial products, we increase trust, we create institutions that can help facilitate these sorts of flows. To talk about our specific recommendations, I'm going to turn this over to Lee now, who will discuss. There are 9 recommendations. After that, we will have our panel discussion. So, Lee, go ahead.
As you can tell, there's going to be a lot more to discuss when we release the full report. And I can tell you that we have planned to release the full report on the anniversary of the International Day of Family Remittances, June 16th, and we're likely going to be doing it in London. Right, Pedro? So we're working with IFAD to figure out where. I nominate London. I think we should do it in London. But anyway, we are planning to release the full report then. So getting underneath a lot of this data will be much more accessible then. I'm going to go through the recommendations and speak to those and kind of point to some of the key findings and why the recommendations were made. So we broke them into 3 broad groups: the local capacity building, data and information sharing, and then financial products and providing assurances for investment. So the 9 recommendations very quickly are: strengthen capacity of local actors to provide demand-driven business development services, support development of effective chambers of commerce and business associations, encourage formal data collection and commission relevant market research in partnership with local entities, which the foreign minister referred to. Some of what they're appealing to the international community to do is to conduct this formal and very precise market research. Encourage information sharing through diaspora investor networks, and encourage diaspora investor meetups, which we'll talk a little bit about. In terms of products, partner with Somali financial institutions to champion savings to invest. So remit to savings, essentially, and then savings to invest campaigns locally, where you start to build up deposit institutions in the country, which the Somali, in the context now, they're not necessarily a savings culture, formal savings. They do informal savings, but formally they're not. And so they're not leveraging institutions. There's not a lot of trust in institutions. We'll talk about that in a moment. Support credit products that leverage locked up real estate value. We're going to talk about it in terms of mortgage, but what we're talking about really is use of property as collateral, because it's one of the problems with when you don't have secure land rights and property rights. It's one of the issues is you have all this investment that gets locked up. Provide tangible assurances to diaspora investors. So this is like in forms of guarantees and upfront assurances. Develop mutual funds that offer varied risk profiles, targeting sectors, and offer a multiple bottom line. Lindsay talked about social impact as well as return and protecting capital. Well, this isn't something that in our context we say, of course, I just buy a mutual fund. In the Somali context, that doesn't yet exist, but it can. And in fact, we're pursuing that. And the final is promote community development finance from a diaspora investment angle. So the first one, strengthen capacity of local actors to provide demand-driven BDS. So here you have the factors influencing Somali-based investment decisions. The top 4 areas are a well-developed business plan, and this isn't uncommon to most investment, it won't shock you. evidence that the investment is profitable or will be profitable, some sort of a presence of a transparent and enforceable contract, and a projected growth potential in the business. Now, when you've operated from a traditional sense, and Somalis are very great, they're great tradesmen, they're entrepreneurial by nature, but they haven't necessarily done it formal. It's always been traditional. Just by providing better business development support services and formalizing these plans, making that available would significantly increase the ability for some outsider to come in and invest. The next recommendation is support development of effective chambers of commerce and business associations. In our economy, or in our, if I wanted to invest in a city I didn't know, I could dial up a number of associations, the chambers, local business associations, market research firms, and get information about a market, about a sector, about whatever. Well, if you look here, the primary, Lindsay mentioned that a lot of the investment is based on trust. Absolutely. So investing with a business partner who knows the context is the number one option for an investor or someone who is a non-investor who would like to become an investor. But mostly they go to family and friends. Now, I don't have to tell you that that can be great for trust, but it isn't always the best for advice. And so what you really want is you have an opportunity here on the far right where the local chambers of commerce are not necessarily seen as institutions you would go to get market information. So we see that as a huge opportunity to develop out the chamber's capacity, and we'll speak more to that a little bit later. Lars Benson is here from CIPE, the Center for International Private Enterprise, who will speak to more to that a little more later. The next one is encourage formal data collection and market research in partnership with local chambers and ministries. So of the obstacles we have, the top 5 are ones that we can't necessarily fix from an economic angle. It's more of a state building, but policy reform, security, making progress in security. So the political instability, the security situation, the enforceability of a contract, corruption, and inadequate banking system. But we definitely can affect whether or not we produce reliable information, and also if that is disseminated well. So encouraging formal data collection, putting that in, and partnering with local institutions is important. I can't tell you how many times I've gone in and worked with local ministries where they've had a great donor aid funded project that's put together some kind of a directory that then they've left because the project was over and now they don't update it, they lose the URL, all these kinds of things you think, wow, I can't believe that they're not keeping this whole thing going. Well, we need to work in concert with the local institutions so that they can bring it forward, because they can and they will. And with their commitment now, they'll put the resources to it. The next one, number 4, is encourage information sharing through diaspora investor networks and meetups that are built around investor profiles. If you ask any Somali, they'll say, Somalis talk a lot. Well, you know what? They do. Somalis network. They are networkers, unparalleled, and they definitely get together. Well, one of the things we saw was they want to pool their money together and basically, offset risk. Some of what we see, though, is they don't necessarily have the best information. When I go into diaspora meetings around the world, whether it's in Stockholm or London or wherever in Amsterdam, they always have great ideas, but it's not quite enough to invest in. So what we're saying is we need to encourage, and we'll have others on the panel, Jeffrey Jackson and Lisa will talk about some of the networking that happens now with diasporas and how organizing this through to do focused meetups would really encourage better investment tourism. Now on the flip side, we have to have the other side capacity built with chambers, et cetera, to provide good information so that we're bringing information over to the diaspora as well. The next is partnering with Somali financial institutions to champion savings to invest campaigns. 4-to-1 respondents in the report were remitters over active investors. So they outnumber, we know that. There's more money going in to basically fund consumption. Well, deposit institutions in the country are there, and they're starting to emerge, but the confidence isn't there yet that I would put and open up a savings account. Well, without a formal instrument to save and leverage, you you need to have a formal instrument to save and leverage. A lot of the remitters were saying, I'd rather be able to put some kind of a collateral deposit in country and then have the banks be able to give a loan to my family member. The banks also are looking toward this more and more. And in spite of what the popular conception is, the banks actually are moving forward quite a bit. There are new banks moving into the market whose value proposition is all around conforming to international standards. They have account holders that are all verified, that have legitimate IDs. They conform to external audit. And now this is the new movers coming in, but the market is shifting toward that. They can actually make deposits in country. The next one is, number 6, is support credit products that leverage locked up real estate. And we've said hybrid mortgage products. Shuraako acts as a neutral broker. We recommend investments to outside investors. We actually do package at times property as collateral. Now, property rights are a real issue, and without good, my watch is ringing. My watch is ringing. That is annoying, but let me turn this off. Yeah, I'm not an advocate. I won't recommend it. By the way, if anybody asks, do you like that iWatch? I'll say, you can get away without it. But that part's kind of nice. But one of the things we see is real estate is the second most common investment going back home. And there's a lot of money going in real estate, but you know what? It's captive. You can't lever it. I was in Mogadishu. There's an older gentleman there who's very successful, who has a lot of properties in Mogadishu, and he built a property near an energy generation plant. Now the energy is rolling up into bigger providers that are becoming, the bigger utilities. So this generation plant is great for the city, but it's created a noise problem where he can't occupy his upper level of his development. So I asked him, what are you going to do? He's got about $2 million tied up in this property. He's like, I don't know. I got to wait until I can flip it, or they move outside the city or whatever. So I said, why don't you just go lever it and take $500,000 out? Well, I can't do it because I can't find an institution that'll underwrite it. Well, it's ridiculous, and we've got all that wealth, all that capital tied up without an ability to leverage it. So we'll talk more about that in the panel. The next one is provide tangible assurances to diaspora investors, such as credit guarantee schemes. We looked at the question, these are different ways to reduce your investment risk when considering Somali investment. How well do you believe these strategies would work? The first one was a matching grant from an international institution, a very traditional aid approach, matching grants. And one of the things we were curious about is, sure, it gets a high, absolutely, I'll take a matching grant for investment, but look to the next. A loan guarantee from an international institution is nearly the same. And if you go far to the right, even a loan guarantee from a Somali institution isn't radically behind. If you start combining these together, your bang for your buck from the donor side on loan guarantees are infinitely better than a matching seed capital, than a matching grant scheme. Plus, if we're shifting from aid-dependent economy to an accountable, market-driven economy, you need to have it come with accountability, and it's got to be merit-based. So really, we're in a position now where if you look at what aid has done with the Development Credit Authority in other contexts, these credit guarantee schemes work, and they actually are profitable for aid. In the Somali context, everybody's still a little bit, is it ready yet? We're actually in the middle right now of designing a credit guarantee with a donor to do a pilot on a credit guarantee. So we're very excited about this prospect. This is huge news for investment in Somalia. The next one is develop mutual funds that offer varied risk profiles targeting key sectors and a multiple bottom line. So what you have here is the direct investor knows the investments, they own the business, they go in strong, they can risk, they have the risk tolerance. But you get over into the co-invest with other diaspora and the mutual fund. This is the remitters, the non-investors, the non-sophisticated would typically here would buy a mutual fund or some kind of a diversified security. Well, we need to offer the same thing in the Somali context. I was talking, I don't remember who it was in the last couple of days, about someone, a Somali diaspora, who wanted to invest in livestock. And he wasn't sure which project to back. And I said, well, what if you could buy a mutual fund where you actually had the banks there selecting 10 of the best companies you go on it? He said, I'd take that in a heartbeat. Well, there actually is, and we'll have on the panel a panel member from Homestrings, which lists securities marketed to diaspora. So these are products that do exist out there, and we're looking into the possibility of putting together securities that could be listed, and you could buy them from your 401k. So imagine that in terms of opening up capital to come in. And then the last one is promoting community development finance, including infrastructure bonds and risk insurance. So as Lindsay pointed out, 39% of the respondents, when asked what's an important factor for investing, they want social impact, but they're not willing to give up protecting their capital or getting somewhat of a return. Well, you know what? Development and infrastructure investment in Somalia is critical. Roads, schools, health, all the different things, energy, etc. But they don't have, their revenue collection is problematic, as you can imagine. They don't have the systems to pull on a tax. It's very difficult for them to raise the money. They look for donor aid to come in and put in infrastructure. Well, if you talk to Somalis, if you get a call from your clan elder and you need to build a school or do some kind of a project, chances are you're going to donate to it. So I started asking a few of them in these focus groups. I said, well, what if instead of having you just put it out, do you know how it's spent? Well, not exactly, but I think they're going to build a school. I can go back and I can check it. But do you know exactly how it's spent? Not really. What if we just organized it into a basic bond and actually put it up, and then you actually had some kind of assurance on that? Would you then put, because you could raise small amounts of money to do local projects. So we're toying with that idea. And then also, Somalia is not a MEGA country. It doesn't conform to the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Association, but some kind of a risk assurance, some kind of, a credit guarantee or some kind of a risk insurance would go a long way to get diaspora to invest. And when you think about the donor dollars that go in, to aid projects, putting a little bit of that toward a guarantee, building the strength of the local institutions, which are there, would go a long way. So that was the 9 recommendations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Lindsay back up. Oh, the last thing. So these are the major themes from the recommendations. These are the cross-cutting themes. We know there's a shift from traditional/informal systems to formal, internationally recognized systems. That's happening already. We need to strengthen local institutions to increase their legitimacy. Okay? Data drives decisions. We all know that, and it needs to be sought, it needs to be understood, it needs to be transparent and easily accessible. Financial institutions and consumers benefit from internationally recognized best practices. And this is a lot of the threat in the Somali context is, can I trust an institution? Well, they're coming there. So we need to keep the momentum going toward international standards. And the final is formal investment vehicles, formal securities, etc., and assurances to invest will make a tremendous difference and an impact. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lindsay, who will bring up the panelists. In fact, we'll invite the panel to come be seated, and she'll introduce the panelists and conduct the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. So we've asked a number of experts here to, as I mentioned before, talk about their experience as it relates to some of the findings and some of the areas in which the SDIS covers. As they get seated here, I'll tell you, we've asked them to sort of speak in order of their expertise across these issue areas. So we'll have 2 individuals talk about local capacity building, then data sharing, so on and so forth. To start, we will hear from Lars Benson. Lars is a Senior Program Officer for Africa at the Center for International Private Development, CIBER. Then we will hear from Pedro de Vasconcelos, who's a manager of financing facility for remittances at the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, which we've talked about today as one of the, or as the partner on this particular project. Next, we will hear about data and information sharing from Liesl Riddle, who we already who spoke a bit this morning as an associate professor of international business and international affairs here at GW. Then we'll hear from Jeffrey Jackson, who's a senior private sector advisor to USAID's Africa Bureau. Finally, for financial products and assurances, we will hear from John Samuel, who's the director of product for Home Strength, which is an investment platform that facilitates diaspora and impact investing. And finally, from Abdi Sheikh Ahmed, a senior advisor in trade and investment for the Office of the President in Somalia. I've asked everybody to sort of give us about 5 minutes of remarks. I'll give you a 1-minute warning over here. Let's go ahead and get started with Lars Benson.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Whoops, okay. And I guess my role here is to talk to you a little bit about why business associations and chambers are important. And I would like to start by suggesting, with the 9 recommendations that we've heard previously, that the chambers and associations, or the private sector, the organized private sector in Somalia, has a critical role to play across all 9 of those different recommendations. When we take a look at part of the study in terms of the factors influencing investment across political stability, security, enforceable contracts, corruption in the banking system, it begs the question on, okay, so why isn't there more investment? I mean, that's the goal of this study, is to really spur future investments in Somalia. And chambers and business associations can play a critical role. We know from around the world that the main reason why businesses join chambers and business associations is for something that we could put in the category of insurance. I'm not talking about insurance products here, but it's really trying to minimize risk. When things go wrong, you typically will turn to a chamber and a business association to act on your behalf. And this is really the primary reasons why members join chambers and associations. They join those chambers and associations so when something goes wrong, or they're being affected by corruption, or they are having problems with regards to security, they have an interlocutor, they have somebody in the middle who can actually work with government in terms of trying to affect change. When we take a look in the United States about why chambers and business associations started, it's a question on self-regulation. Before, when the United States was just being formed, business associations and chambers of commerce were originally started, and it was all about self-regulation. It was about really assisting in workforce development. It was about increasing efficiencies. It was about the ability to handle different aspects that might be related to corruption, or when you didn't have the government regulations in place, it was about creating those different regulations. And we can see that now in a lot of different professional societies around the world, such as the accountants or the banking system, where you have this self-regulation really creating the rules and then working with government in terms of trying to spur future investment. Then finally, when we take a look at businesses, and to have a successful business, you really have to have 3 things. You have to have knowledge about really the product or services that you will be offering. You have to have the opportunity, which is more about the ecosystem, the enabling environment, the climate for that potential investment. And you have to have access to finance. And chambers and associations play also a critical role here. When we take a look at some of the recommendations or why people and what they want in terms of investing in Somalia out of the study, the issues of business plan goes to knowledge. The profit potential is really about opportunities. And then we're also talking about finance, which the diaspora investors will be bringing to the table. But they're also looking for other things like matching grants, co-investment, and credit guarantees. So when we take a look again at the 3 characteristics, knowledge, the chambers and the business associations, it's really about market information. What are the opportunities to invest? And because you have different businesses that are members, and if the chambers and associations are fulfilling their role, they're collecting information about opportunities. They're beginning to perform the due diligence function that is necessary to even attract greater investment. When we take a look at opportunity, that access or that ability to have contact with different businesses is also talking about where might there be the future investment. And if the chambers and associations are able to package that information and work with the diaspora communities in terms of providing them the needed information, those opportunities will therefore attract greater investment. And then finally, on access to finance, what we're really not suggesting here is that the chambers get in the business of providing loans. but they can work with, and the associations, as, for example, a banking association, can work on creating the regulations and the really environment that will attract that different type of investment in Somalia. Thank you.
I'm putting a watch here. You've been really good, actually, under 5 minutes. I don't know if I can be such a good. Well, thank you very much. On the 5 minutes, I mean, Lee, you introduced IFAD. I think you give a good overview of what we do. As our name indicates, we're investing in rural people. We look at risk management and resilience, particularly in the majority of the developing countries we're working. The root causes of fragility when we are addressing fragile states. We're trying to address not only the political, of course, and the effects that this has in rural economies, but also the byproducts of that, migration. And this is something that we've been looking at now for over a decade, the aspect of migration, particularly in rural areas, domestic or internationally. And this really draw our attention because, and I would like maybe to do a Google map zoom out here, thematically and institutionally or geographically at least, to make the distinctions between this remittances phenomenon and this diaspora engagement phenomenon. It might look from the title of this event that we're talking about Somalia, and maybe some of you are still wondering, okay, is this a reality or not? This is a reality, and it's happening globally. Every single country or every single diaspora originating from a developing country in the world has some sort of what we're seeing today at a different stage of development. What is extremely interesting and for IFAD and many other partners is the potential that exists also for Somalia. Many would think that remittances is the only way to go. We just need to look at the GDPs. The influence on GDP is so big. Can we really start talking about investment? And this survey, what I love about this, and from institutions like Shuraako and IFAD, we are project-based, not research, really. We try to test on the ground and see what works or not to create better models of intervention, is that this survey came after we started doing things. We have an active project. We're thinking now about the second stage of it. So this survey allows us to address, as we go, better models of intervention to link what I call the supply and demand for investments. We have, as demonstrated, a lot of investors willing to invest in local economic activities, and we have opportunities on the other side, and what we see is an enabling environment that needs to be tweaked, personalized. And this is our take-home message for IFAD. How can we address these parts in basically to scale the results, to make it happen? How can we work with other partners that are actively engaged? We're an IFI. How can we work with other IFIs in this? So we go beyond pilots to scale approach, and I think this is the exact nature of the second phase of our collaboration with Shuraako in this. So. There's really a lot to say about this, and I think we could stay here for days. So I think I have like 30 seconds left. But what I would like to say, and I think this is important, is there's $450 billion in remittances going to developing countries. That's one pot. There's another $50 billion in savings from the diaspora. That's something else. I think we need to understand the remittances go for precise needs back home. They can be called consumption. Food might be called consumption, but nobody will argue about the importance of food security and remittances towards that. However, when you provide more choices, when you work on the channeling of these flows, this is where a lot of other opportunities appear, financial options for those who send these remittances and those that receive. And when you pass this towards savings, that's when we can start talking about investments. So it is not something that will replace the other. It's just a more efficient way of looking at the remittances aspect, but creating the opportunities also to motivate investment, savings and investments. Wow, therefore I have more than 30 seconds. So this is, I think, is one crucial aspect. And in the case of Somalia, with exemplary work that Shuraako has been doing there, we actually hope that this can benefit other entry points in other countries or in other fragile state or fragile situations by identifying this model through these pilots and how we can scale these opportunities. To close, I would like to do a mea culpa of a lot of international organizations. When we realized at IFAD that the investment in agriculture from the diaspora was 4 times global ODA, we had to take a moment of silence and really think about that. Meaning the diaspora invests 4 times more than all the ODA combined to agriculture, and they do that directly. And it's not the elephant in the room, it's the herd of elephant in the rooms that we haven't seen here. And they might say the same, we might be actually being seen the same way. So this collaboration for the co-development in terms of partnership is crucial and is one of the aspects here that we would like to try to identify on how to work better. 30 seconds, sorry.
Good, thank you. Dr. Riddle.
Well, I just have to compliment my friends at Shuraako on an outstanding study. I know how hard it is to actually do one of these studies, and to do it so well with such a good response rate is a real testament to, I think, the relationship that Shuraako has in the community and the hard work that was put into the project. What I really like about the recommendation set that you have in front of you here is that so often these reports sort of end with a series of recommendations that sound more like what our diaspora can do for us. And what I love about these recommendations is that so many of them are focused on what we can do for the diaspora. And I think that's a very important thing. I was asked to kind of draw upon some experiences from other studies and other sort of diaspora models and kind of draw some linkages to issues 3 and 4 here. I think in terms of you cannot underscore enough, obviously, the need for information, the distance, even though that there are these social ties. The fact is that the distance creates greater uncertainties, and people leave for a reason. And so I think being able to bridge this information and knowledge gap that's mentioned in the report is absolutely critical. People are looking for 2 kinds of information. I think especially the longer an individual is outside of their country of origin context, more of that basic information about the economy and some opportunities and just overall industry reports is absolutely critical. So as my colleagues have mentioned, the importance of these chambers of commerce and enhancing their capabilities in terms of being able to bring these reports and disseminate them is critical, but in more of a one-stop shopping kind of way. I think we're often used to doing these reports and putting them on a shelf, and they're very long and very difficult to kind of consume. So we have to think about, I think, very creatively as to not only how can we enhance the capability of putting that information together, but putting it together more in a one-stop shop way. You all have done a great job with the Remittances Gateway project as a good sort of example of kind of putting a lot of that information in one place. With the Nigerian example, there's an organization, NGEX, so you can look it up, ngex.com. This is sort of it's a private sector organization for the Nigerian diaspora, but this is exactly the kind of gap that they are trying to fill, partnering with local chambers of commerce, partnering with the ministries in Nigeria, but to be able to fill that kind of information void with the Nigerian context. So I think there are some examples of those one-stop models out there, one-stop shop models that should be considered. I think also thinking about disseminating the information creatively. The government of Morocco, for example, I think did a very interesting thing that Somalia might want to consider. There is an organization here in the States called Adventure Partners that has relationships with universities all around North America and in Europe. And what they do is they source business plan competitions to professors like me. And so the government of Morocco, when they signed the free trade agreement with the United States, created a case study about 5 major industry sectors in Morocco, kind of up-to-date information about those industry sectors, and then posed the question to business students. How can Morocco better penetrate the U.S. market and take advantage of this free trade association agreement. And business school students sort of thought very deeply, got to know more about Morocco. Many of my students that worked on this project had never heard of Morocco before. They learned so much about it. It really fundamentally changed their ideas. My recommendation would be thinking about working with the chambers of commerce to put together some of these industry reports into one of those types of competitions, putting it out there to, number one, sort of change the mindset of many young American managers about Somalia and the business opportunities there, and particularly target like the Carlson School of Management, for example, in Minnesota, that has so many Somali business school students studying there. I was recently speaking there about issues related to investment in Africa, and one of the Somali students, MBA students there, took me aside and said, we're so glad that somebody actually cares about our country and is talking about it as a business opportunity. Widening that to some sort of larger business plan competition, getting media exposure for that, I think is another way to think about creatively disseminating information. My last point that I think is absolutely critical, Lindsay mentioned this issue about trust matters. Lee talked about how Somalis like to talk a lot. One thing I've learned recently from working with the Sierra Leonean diaspora is how critical it is for all of us in this ecosystem to cultivate relationships with those diaspora opinion leaders, and most importantly, source them a pipeline of digestible, consumable content. I'm thinking here things like infographics, not this whole report, an infographic from the report, video interviews, these types of small little bite-sized key chunks of information, but not just once when the report comes out, over a period of time, so that they can be pushing this out regularly over social media and through their networks and at their diaspora organization events. But don't see this as a one-time thing when the report is done. Think of it as over a life course of a relationship with those individuals, because that is how you get things done, by that sort of first tier of volunteers from the community who have the trust, who have the networks. What they need from us in the development community is that highly multimedia integrated consumable content. And that's what I think we all need to be thinking about more importantly. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Liesl. I'm going to go off script for a few seconds and give you a bit of historical context. I was a chief of party for a USAID project in Somalia over 30 years ago, actually. And our counterpart agency in the Somali government was the Ministry of Commerce. And one of our key tasks was then to privatize the Chamber of Commerce, and that's almost an oxymoron, but at that time, the Chamber of Commerce was a part of the Ministry of Commerce, and therefore was part of the government, and which obviously was not best practice and very non-standard. So we enlisted actually the help of SIPE, the U.S. Chamber, and the Association of Chamber Executives to actually concoct a plan to propose to government to actually spin it out and to make it a proper Chamber of Commerce. Well, put it this way, it was a lot more difficult than it sounded because of the very political nature of things at the time. But having said that, one of the interesting things that we did, and again, context, in the 80s, diaspora wasn't a big thing, nor was remittances. But, and that's what was actually my first introduction to it, because one of the members of the chamber and one of the companies which actually became my client was a company which had just obtained a license to manufacture the powder detergent from Kenya, Omo soap. And he needed to build the spraying tower, and he needed a couple of $1 million to do that. So basically he says, well, IFC, same kind of thing, where are your numbers, where are your accounts? Well, don't have them. So what here he did was, he says, well, periodically I go overseas, talk to people's families, bring the money back in shillings. They give it to me in dollars and lira and so forth. And then he banks it in, I don't know where he banked it, but it was somewhere in the Middle East. We weren't that close. But what that was is basically people remitting money back to their families in Somalia via a businessman. And this required an entire amount of trust, because at that time the official exchange rate was 99 to 1, which nobody used. So the question was, what exchange rate are you giving the family? what is the communication between family in terms of what the purpose and use of the money was. So he was sort of a go-between for a number of people. And on each trip, he raised millions of dollars. The other thing is, this money being offshore was not recorded in any books in Somalia. So the investment was done by remittances through a bank in a third country, and the project was done. And that really showed me a couple of things. One, there's a huge underground economy in Somalia at the time. And secondly, there's a lot of trust, because none of this was documented, and everything went smoothly. After that, we decided that we took the project in another direction, because we found out that there were other companies in the same position, and IFC was like, well, there's no accounts. So what we did then, we brought in Price Waterhouse, another company out of Nairobi called Cook Sutton Githinji and Company, to actually start going to the companies, and the record keeping was excellent. There were just no proper financial accounts. So they were then able to assist the companies to begin to do the accounts, set up training. So the training was ongoing in terms of making the bookkeepers know how to prepare accounts according to, at that time, US GAAP. So the project ended up being more, or actually less, in terms of developing the chamber, but more in terms of bringing standards of practice to the local businesses we were dealing with. So very good exercise for us. And what I'm doing now is working at USAID with the African Diaspora Marketplace, and Somalia has not been a part of that for reasons that are obvious, and we work closely with GW on that particular effort. Having said that, there's an effort within USAID to look at adding Somalia to the list of countries eligible for the Diaspora Marketplace. This is a program where we actually provide a matching grant of varying amounts. To start off at 100,000, 50. Last round, ADM3 was $30,000, but also included a TA package from Deloitte. But it's a way of leveraging investment and indirectly remittances for the entrepreneurs, the diasporans, who want to invest in their home countries or countries of origin. We know that there's a lot of pent-up demand in Somalia. People have come to us any number of times. Like I said, conditions prevented us in previous years from doing that, but I think the next round will certainly include, and look forward to including, Somalia.
Thank you, Jeff. And actually, I love seeing the report like this from Shuraako, because it connects the dots for me for what I do at HomeStrings. And just briefly, what HomeStrings is, it's an online investment platform that's designed for the diaspora to invest back into projects in their home countries. And what we do is we utilize crowdfunding techniques to crowd the money together and then make that large sum investment back into those projects that need the funding to make an economic and social impact in their home countries. And so when I look at the recommendations, I see the trust, and I see the meetups, and essentially that's what HomeStrings is built around. It was built around providing vetted, transparent projects, and then also coming together as a crowd, as a community, to invest in these projects. And as I hear every single person on this panel speaking, from Lars talking about the due diligence opportunities and the access to capital, that's what HomeStrings does. Is where we are providing opportunities, identifying opportunities, and then providing access from capital. And just as Pedro was talking about, those remittance numbers are staggering. And that's what we're trying to tap into, is bring that money to those opportunities. And then we go into Liesl, is bringing that into bite-sized information so that individuals can understand that. And that's what we're trying to work on. And then I love the story that Jeff just talked about that businessman who was creating a HomeStrings platform as an individual, is collecting money in a foreign country and then making that investment. That's what HomeStrings does. We provide opportunities in offshore accounts to then provide that into the home countries. So we've actually taken every single thing here to provide those opportunities for the diaspora. And as we start to look at the Somali diaspora, we talk about some of the products that we currently look at on the HomeStrings platform. I look at the portfolio investments, and I look at those credit authorities, the Development Credit Authority guarantees. And then I start thinking about other types of products that may be a good fit for the Somali diaspora. So I'll talk about 3 different products first. The first product is a product that we're offering to the Macedonian diaspora. and it actually has a development credit authority guarantee, 50% guarantee on this opportunity. And what it is CIF Macedonia 2, which is a small enterprise assistance fund, has a private equity fund in Macedonia. And what HomeStrings is doing is providing a loan to that private equity fund, which is investing into SMEs in Macedonia. And the Development Credit Authority is actually providing a 50% credit guarantee on the investment to be repaid to HomeStrings from CIF. And this guarantee alone provides a lot of trust and transparency for the diaspora to have some understanding and risk mitigation, and understanding that if I make this investment, there is some guarantee there that between that investment that I'm making, and I can really make an impact there. So guarantees have really made a big impact on the HomeStrings model. We've also seen that in Kenya, where we are investing in a opportunity called Innovare, which is a financial institution that's providing small and medium-sized loans to SMEs in Kenya, farmers. And these farmers have a guarantee from the African Guarantee Fund that they will repay to the Innovare, and then we can provide a significant return to our investors. But there's a new product that's really that's come by my desk, and we're about to launch it, and it's a development impact bond. And this kind of taps onto the social impact aspect. And in this type of situation, at the development impact bond, the organization gets money up front from an investor. And this is where the access to capital really plays a big part. One of the challenges that, in this case, I'm talking about a Cameroon Cataract Eye Foundation, which is building a hospital in Cameroon. And one of the challenges that they will have is they don't have access to capital right away. So by collecting money from investors, they get the cash up front. And then a donor on the back end will guarantee the repayment of the principal and the return to those investors. And rather than a donor giving it directly to the hospital, here you're getting investors to get involved and to fund these socially impactful projects. And then there are measurements, result-driven measurements for outcomes that need to be met, that the hospital will then get continued funding. And this is a way to build a sustainable financial model for social impact organizations. So there are several different types of investment products out there that can really generate interest from the diaspora. And I hope that we can take a look at how we can get the Somali diaspora involved into financing projects back in their home countries and leading to economic development.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to start first by, just letting you know what, from my perspective, what I want to do is talk to you about as a member of the diaspora, number one, because I'm one of the Somali diaspora. Mm-hmm. The second aspect of it is as I'm someone who has some work experience recently in Somalia, and so I understand a little bit of the context and what a little bit of the challenges and the needs that are there. So before I go there, but let me tell you a little story. Back in 1989, I went to visit Somalia, and while I was there, I thought I had a brilliant business idea. And what I noticed was in the real estate market, to find a property to purchase, you have to know somebody who knows someone who may know someone who has a property to refer to them that they can sell it to you. And the system was so inefficient and not transparent at all. And in my back of my mind, I'm wondering, why can't we just formalize this and have a real estate offices, the agents, the brokers have listings, and people come and see, and they purchase what they want, and property that are priced properly, and that sort of thing. So I talked to one local businessman, asked, why is that not happening? And he kind of chuckled and said, probably about my naivete, and he said, well, you have to understand one thing. The people who are buying and the ones who are purchasing don't want others to know that they do these transactions. Right? And that was the story about the informal, economy and how things are done informally through these networks that have number one, very inefficient in many ways. Even though they're profitable and people are making money of it, they're inefficient, and it could be done in a more effective way if they are formalized. Another piece I took note of was the importance of context. Coming in from somewhere else with a different idea, you might want to, you're thinking about, well, this could work. Why shouldn't it work? It makes sense. But you have to also consider the context and what motivates the people and the stakeholders in that context and what's going on in the country. So I think I've learned those to a certain extent. As I look at the report and some of the recommendations, which I think are fantastic, I think we should also be aware of context. And whether these wonderful things that we think make sense will actually work in the Somali context. And every time we do these things and we try to implement these remedies, we have to be aware of that context and make sure that we are doing that. The other thing I think, collectively, when you look at the recommendations from the report, I think all that recommendations, to my point of view, are relevant and topical and necessary for the diaspora to invest, to overcome some of these obstacles we've heard that people are concerned about, and also the capital formation side and how to get funds to fund these projects and things that they want to do and invest. But I think also what is invariably important in Somalia is when you have all these recommendations and things that are taking place and different players coming in, is the importance of coordination, right, and coherence, so that if somebody is working on the investment opportunity identification side, they're working with the people who can provide them the funds, and be engaged with the people who can provide the business services that they need, so that those linkages are there and coordinated and link it up. And in terms of the product and service, I think the remittance to savings may be suitable for regular savers who save, and that will fund projects and things like that. But one of the things I like is the credit guarantees to some extent, because that also strengthens the local banking institutions, because if the funds are going they're not going directly to the individual investor. So then the record keeping, the documentation that's needed, that the banks will do that. So those funds will go there, but also you get them the training and things like that. And finally, one thing I want to see as we go through this is there are two things. One is, as the action plans that come out of these recommendations get implemented, there got to be some forum or that people come together that are working in different areas where they can exchange information and facilitate information flow and make sure that people are not working at cross purpose but working together in unison and everything's orchestrated. And the other piece that I want to look at is, from what I understand, Somaliland has made some strides in encouraging and getting some of the investments back into Somaliland. I would like to see the lessons learned from there, and maybe we can apply some of those to the rest of the Somali region. Thank you.
All right, we have accomplished something I have yet to see in my professional career, which is be about 10 minutes early to arrive at the question and answer. I'm really glad we are, because I think there's quite a few issues that are on the table for us to talk about. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to you all. What sort of questions do you have for the panelists or for Lee and myself? Go ahead, sir.
My name is Farah Mohammed. First of all, I would like to thank you for Shuraako and our future. And actually, I met with some of the employees in our case, and I believe I also met with Lee in our case. Sorry. And I want to just only, on all these recommendations, I think that's a good thing. I'm in the real estate business, and I often go back to Somaliland. I haven't been in Mogadishu and that area yet. And one of the difficulties that I have seen is the issues that we are talking about in terms of institutional building in order investment to take place. As a person who licensed in 3 states here in Washington, Maryland, and Virginia, and knowing how the American real estate works, and mostly we are ruled by ethics, forget about laws, it is very difficult to do business there. And what I have realized is, in most of the real estate business is transact through what we call in Somalia notario, or here notary public. You can see a piece of property that has been sold to same property to 3 different people, because the transactions just only takes place a notario, not a government institution. So I don't want to take that much of time, but I would like, I really very happy that I see a recommendation is, but I personally believe unless an institution is built, it is very difficult to most of, even forget about anybody else, but even Somalians to go back and do a really a huge investment that can make any difference. Thank you.
Yeah, I can kind of respond to that, or others can respond. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just, well, I'm not a direct response, but there's an organization that has, you should probably get in touch with. It's called the International Real Property Foundation. And they are sort of a nonprofit international wing of the National Association of Realtors. And USAID funded them for a number of years to actually go in and look at property markets. And they've done quite a few studies in Nigeria, Kenya. They're doing some work in Uganda right now. This is not a market that they've looked into, but this is certainly something that they probably would be open to looking at. Yeah. And they've had a lot of experience on the African continent. So I would suggest that since you're a licensed agent, I'll provide that information for you. The lady's name is Sylvia Lucchini. She's based in Chicago. But certainly something that should be perhaps put on their radar.
Absolutely. Lars, do you have a comment?
Yeah, we also work with the same organization, creating what we call property rights scorecards, which sort of take the enabling environment in different countries. We're trying to do this actually across the board in a lot of different developing countries. But speaking to obviously some of the recommendations of the report and also some of the challenges that you're facing in terms of investment. I think as well that there's a critical role, when I was talking about self-regulation as well, there's a critical role for civil society or organized private sector to really play in terms of trying to create the rules and the regulations that you need in order to have property markets work.
One of the things I'll say too to this is I've worked with the private banks. There are basically 6 provisionally licensed, or actually licensed banks in Somalia. The licensure under the central bank is still being, the oversight is still being strengthened. But nonetheless, the private banks themselves have called for and are looking for better land rights and access to title, clear title, because they want to leverage it as well. And, you know, we've actually had conversations with the government, with the federal government, and in the Somaliland context, when we facilitated investments, we take property as collateral. We register it with the notary public, but again, is it true title? All those sorts of things. It's really touch and go. It's one of the reasons we made a recommendation saying some kind of a hybrid credit product. Now, you may have to have a discount value on the property because prices on property in Somalia, oh my gosh. You know, I mean, you go there and you hear what people are paying here and there, and talk about bubbles. I mean, you can see things just going crazy because you get what you can get when you get it. And then the only way to get your money back is to get out. So it's this crazy volatile situation. So it's one of those areas that we think there needs to be attention to it. A lot of it, you know, in the conflict, everybody knows that all the titles basically just went to the wind or to wherever, or who ended up getting them from the files. And so sometimes you can buy it back on the market. You can actually go out and put a call for your title and find it back. But again, that's not a reliable system. And there have been inroads to look at land registration systems, and there are a certain number of properties that are legitimately registered. So it's the seeds are there. Another question?
I saw another hand back here first, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
I know we can all hear ourselves. I think, though, for the recording, we're going to keep passing the microphone.
Sure. Thank you. My name's Lynn, and as my Somali friends and brother and sister back in Seattle, they call me Liban. And so I got a Somali name. That's really cool. But I have a question is that as we have more information and gatherings about investment for the diaspora in Somali, what in my experience, in my observation traveling to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, and in other areas in Washington State, is that while we have definitely awesome studies that are being done for investment and business best practices and building associations and commerce and chamber of commerce in Somali, I find in my observation is there are quite lackings in terms of necessary data and building infrastructure and building capacity for businesses in the United States, outside in the Occident, outside of Somali, so that oftentimes you have Somali who here in the United States and elsewhere are not connected to local chambers themselves, don't know quite how to gather and get in the data so that they can build their own capacity and learning in that aspect, so that when they go and do investment, they have a certain degree and of knowledge and information to be like build up so that they can understand and be sophisticated enough to catch on to these kinds of data and be more proactive, as well as be more smart about connecting and working with international organizations when it comes to investment and capitalize and leveraging with international monetary system to do that. I'm wondering if any of the panels could offer me some advices and maybe some other resources that I can share with my Somali brothers and sisters back in Seattle.
Pedro.
Right. No, thank you very much for that. Is it working?
Yeah.
For that remark. As I mentioned during my intervention, around these models, IFAD financed around 50 projects over the last years. And one thing that we notice there's basically one for financial inclusion, dealing a lot with remittances at the meso level and so on, and the other is diaspora engagement, and basically identifying investment opportunities and entrepreneurship. So projects directed in that branch. And one thing that we realized was how crucial, we call it financial literacy, that it actually has a lot more to it. But financial literacy, how crucial it was for the diaspora, potential investors, and entrepreneurship. One example that I can mention is the activities with the Filipino community in Italy. These migrants that were in Italy were sending remittances, not savings. Thanks to remittances and financial literacy, they were able, one is how to say no, basically, meaning not sending all the time. Really taking a better look at what your remittances should be used for. But most importantly, they were able to save, and a savings rate that actually was incredible, from not saving anything, over 1,000 euros of salary, basically, to being able to save 300 euros monthly. That was an incredible savings rate that they could achieve. And after that, financial literacy allows them to identify opportunities for investments back home in their countries or in their regions of origin. That's one part of also that the program did. With local financial institutions, agriculture cooperatives that were involved in that process, and with the new acquired skills, as you say very well, it's not because you're a migrant that you're an entrepreneur or an investor. You might have something, because it takes a lot to leave your country and your family behind but still, that's not all the qualifications you need. So the help is there. So with these new qualifications, they started investing. In one of the examples I will share with everybody, in Eglayer Farm, that provides 6% guarantee on investment. What I wanted to say with this is, from not being able to save 1 cent, we suddenly had investors investing in local economic activities back in their whole communities, with a whole new set of acquired skills as entrepreneurs and investors. So every single project, and I finish with that did not include this aspect of qualifications or financial literacy, actually did not provide the results we wanted. Only those that included that, both on the receiving side of remittances or on the sending side, show success.
More comments from panelists? I've got a response to this too, but go ahead.
I was just say very briefly, the example that I did mention from the Nigerian case was an interesting one to think about in light of your question, because it is a diaspora-created organization in Silicon Valley, and their focus is twofold. One is to collect information about the diaspora for the diaspora in country of residence, number one, and then number two, to provide information about the business environment in Nigeria. And so they're the place that they're trying to be, anyway, the place that businesses, but also Nigerian diasporans would turn to reach out to the Nigerians, either in country of residence or in origin country. So a truly transnational NGO, but created by the diaspora for the diaspora, as well as other actors.
Go ahead. One more comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Liban, I'll just add to that. I think in the spirit of the diaspora doing things for themselves, I think if for those you work with, encourage them to actually share that information and maybe have like that forum where the local people can identify what the local resources are available to them, so they can tap into those and get those experiences and draw information from that.
Let me respond as well and say the market has picked this up as well. I know from my own interactions with the International Bank of Somalia, for one, in Mogadishu, they know that they need to provide financial literacy and investment literacy to their customers, their clients. They're actually hosting trainings, a non-financial services value add, because they need to help their customer base, their borrower base, understand the value use of credit. One of the threats right now in the economy is there's a big influx of microcredit capital coming in, and it's going to new emerging microcredit institutions in the country, but they're not regulated. Now, so they're basically controlled as much as whoever the donor was expects them to do a report back, which is kind of crazy. And you've got larger institutions that are putting together, like Dahab Shill, Micro Dahab, and Ka Express, Kim's and Kava and other. We work closely with them. We've done joint funds with them. But one of the concerns you have is microcredit can easily go predatory, and people can consume it instead of use it as credit. So one of the worries we have is that if they don't get the right kind of oversight and teaching, training, and literacy into the market, you could end up creating kind of a negative effect, unintended negative consequence.
One just basic generic resource is the IFC's SME toolkit.
Yep.
Which is actually pretty good, and it also, directs you to other resources globally. And if you're just focused on taking like courses for SBA and MBDA, I'm sure in the Minneapolis and the Seattle area there are business development centers, and a lot of these are contracted to universities. So if you just go to SBA.gov or MBA.gov, you'll find a lot of that information.
Oh, and Shuraako does it too. So when folks come to Shuraako, they have to go through a process where we don't purport to be trainers or educators. But what we know is by bringing them through a process, they have to respond in a way that brings them through a literacy process. Next question. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dan Silverstein. I have several comments, if you don't mind me.
Sure.
I'm going to bring you the microphone in just a second.
The first one is, there was a graph in your presentation that isn't in this discussion brief, which was the most interesting to me, which has to do with objections to investing. The one that is in the discussion brief on page 5 is factors influencing Somali-based investment decisions. And I noticed that there's no reference to land tenure. And I was wondering if there's a reason why it wasn't included. And there's also no reference to markets as an outlet for whatever the economic development creates. And I was wondering if there was a reason for that. That's my first question. The second one is, I noticed that in this brief, the risk profile, 74% of the people surveyed are no greater than moderate risk investors. This is obviously a fragile state, and I'm wondering how you interpret the fact that so many are low, very low, and moderate, no better than moderate, and would still be considered as potential investors in this regard. The next question is, with regard to unlocking the capital in real estate, I'm wondering who the counterparty is. You need a banking system, you need a syndicator, and you need somebody who's willing to lend their money to a borrower. And if you could expand on that, if anybody in the panel could expand on that, I'd be interested. And the last thing is regarding mutual funds. Who's the underwriter? How big would you suggest it would be? And where would it be listed? Thanks.
Let me respond quickly to the land tenure piece. We did actually in the full report, we have a commentary in there from Landesa, who is an expert, who their focus is in and around land rights, land tenure, and talking about generically the power and the benefit of addressing land tenure issues. Is your question, why was it not one of the obstacles to investment, or?
That it just didn't, it's not in this list of reasons on which you would make it.
Oh, the objections and yeah. So parties are buying real estate. They're buying property there without clear land rights. That's the thing. So part of what's happening is this flurry is occurring, and maybe Abdi, you can respond to this as well, but it is occurring. What we're seeing is they're buying it up. They know they own it. Once you get the ownership of the property, typically you put somebody on the property. They sit on it, and so they protect it. But there may be a dispute later on. What's your good?
Well, I just want that would be great for a I'm not sure what you call it, an anecdotal marketplace. But if you want to get serious companies to come in there for ecotourism, flags that are around the world, they're not seriously going to consider this if they don't know who owns the property.
Correct. And in the full report, we actually have more of a draw out saying we need to focus attention on this and secure land rights. Did you
just one comment. One of the things that are going on, you're right, absolutely. I mean, that concern is there, and there's a lot of dispute about land, and there's no question about that. But also part of the informal and the way that Somalis kind of dealt with this stuff, which may not scale in terms of foreign investors coming in, is there are levels. There are some properties that people know there's a dispute somewhere along the line. And there are people, Somali stock we'll talk about, right? So people know people who owns real estate and who actually own this property from the old days when registration property rights were, to some extent, were there. So there are certain pieces of land or properties that people know are legitimate, and they're held by the legitimate people. Yeah. So some people will do that, and they will only deal with those because there's a fair amount of confidence that this is you don't have a problem. And then there are others where the gray area, and then there are others that are in the speculative spectrum.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to know the market.
And that's true. In the middle of Mogadishu, there's a complex going up, a high-rise called Safari Towers.
Yeah.
It's called Safari Towers.
Safari Towers, yeah.
Safari Towers. So you've got mixed living, you've got living, and you've got office space there. Well, that footprint is owned and titled, the people know it. So there are mortgages going in on all that property. Yeah. And actually there are banks there doing up to 15-year mortgages, which is unheard of in that market, to do a 15-year mortgage in that market. Now, and it's a local bank that's extending that because they know that property and they know that it is owned. So, yeah.
I'm not looking to dominate this conversation, but you keep saying that they're just these are international banks that are part of the international banking system, the SWIFT system, et cetera. Are they local Somali
bank that's offering that credit there? But again, we can go into further detail on that. There was another part of his question.
Yeah, there are Somali banks, but they are also trying to register and comply with the international rules of that. So and they got links with they have correspondent banks and things like that. So it's not just small mom and pop bank operating in an isolated area. Certainly they have challenges and they have learning curve and develop market and develop and they need to develop a market more. But they are setting up the basics of what it takes to be a bank and become those financial intermediaries that are necessary for markets to develop.
Yeah, you asked a series of good questions. One of the questions you asked was about this risk tolerance number that's in the brief, but we didn't talk about much up here. So we asked folks to sort of identify how tolerant they were of risk, assuming that one of the obstacles to investment could be just sort of your perceived risk of the situation, the investment, the country, so on and so forth. And frankly, I was surprised by that. What we found is that most people, it was a sort of what we call a bell-shaped distribution, meaning most people were sort of moderately tolerant of risk. Probably most people in this room are moderately tolerant of risk. And that the people who were investing in Somalia right now are only slightly more tolerant of risk, which I actually interpret in a really positive way. I think what it means is that the chances to market these products to the Somali diaspora are much wider. We don't have to sort of only target those people who really will accept risk. We could actually target a lot of people because people are investing, even though they kind of think that they're, in the middle of this. Yeah. So I would interpret that particular number in a positive way. I think as we sort of go through and these products are created and distributed, we'll sort of see if that stands the test of time. But as I said, I think it's a positive finding to come out of this particular report. Other questions? Yeah.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Sure, yeah, Alex.
I would say to the risk profile as well, that probably has a lot to do with perspective. So if you've exiled or if you've emigrated from your country, you've started a whole new life with a whole family, and you're starting all over again, I think your perspective of where your risk tolerance is changes. So I think that definitely feeds into the report and kind of adds to that Bell distribution curve.
But some of what we want to pilot with the mutual funds, and we're talking to donors, is combining credit guarantees and guarantee schemes to underwrite these products. And so you can actually have them underwritten and give the assurances, and then start to prove that flows can occur, set systems up and strengthen them, and then step back. So and so that's a stepping stone, really building out the systems that can work. So next question.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah. We're glad you guys have a lot of questions.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Session. I'm from the Somalia desk at State Department, and it's a pleasure to join you all this morning. I primarily focus on security issues, which includes anti-money laundering and countering terrorism financing. And one of the things we talked about is security as being an obstacle to investment, and we have some programs that we've been working with to try to strengthen the Central Bank of Somalia. And something I think about, and a question I have, is in trying to support institution building, does the diaspora have a role to play there, and how can we better engage them on that issue to get more investment and to attract more investment into Somalia?
Does anybody want? Abdi, you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, I'll take it. I think part of it is the diaspora, to some extent, have already taken on that risk and invested and went back to the country and done that. And so they're setting the example for others to come and do that. But they also have shown where, maybe a couple of years ago, nobody would dare to go, that, you can actually go there and do something, so they have to do that. So I think to the extent that the diaspora groups work with the government and the government institutions and maybe even, bring to bear some pressure to do some things in the security front, they could help. They could be levers that move the government system as well to some extent. So I think they have a role to play as they invest, and also that they take part in pushing the whole system and the society along to improve the security apparatus. But also, I think this part of this discussion and and setting these platforms for investments, we also need to look at the government security partners to engage in that discussion and make sure they're also creating the spaces for these things to happen. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around that.
One thing I can comment on, I'm familiar with your project, the CT project, and the Central Bank and FSVC, working with them. I know Eddie well, and we ski together, and I've been with him when he's in Nairobi and such. But some of the things we talk about is the capacity building with the Central Bank to put together the systems to verify and address potential terrorist finance is one side. But we know we've got to work with the private banks at the same time to voluntarily adopt standards. In fact, we'd put in a proposal to look at how to organize them into an association and self-regulate, as Lars has talked about, for the purpose of, again, handling this flow. When I meet with diaspora communities, they're flabbergasted when you say, there is a bank there that is receiving money SWIFT, the SWIFT coding money in and out, that has verified accounts, that has external audit. They say, I never knew. And so you've got the likes of large oil companies coming in. They're going to bank with the local banks. They actually have put their auditors on the bank, and they've passed audit. And so you're starting to see a better track record starting. So I would say it's not too soon to really seriously start considering these products. You may think it's pre-frontier. I think it's not pre-frontier anymore. It's becoming just frontier. So anyway, next question, Johannes? I'm sorry.
No, we'll probably have time. I know we're right at our time, and some folks may need to go. We'll take a couple more questions, and then we'll reserve the rest of them for conversation after we break.
First, I want to congratulate Shuraako for this wonderful study. I first learned about it in January. I've seen many of these kinds of studies across the globe, including our colleague Liesel's many studies. What's fascinating, and for me, it's more of a comment than a question, if I may be allowed to. It's been a very enriching and interesting experience, reading and learning about the findings today. For me, listening to all the risk discussions just a few minutes ago, what I look at, I've given a number of presentations on the challenges of diaspora investments. What I see here is the inverse of those challenges. For many of the diaspora, the investment challenges are government, right? Bureaucracy, corruption. Here, it's the absence of government is the challenge that I see. But I also see that as an opportunity in the Somali experience. Somalis are very innovative, outside-of-the-box thinking people. And they've done a lot of things to keep life going without the presence of government. And in terms of looking at and discussing risks, and the way we look at from the common traditional view, the Western view of risk management, whether in the microcredit, the banking sector, mutual funds, is completely inverse in the Somali context. What I thought maybe an area for future exploration is to use the existing social, religious, risk management mechanisms to be institutionalized to help manage these risks, whether it's in the property market, right? So, for example, in Ghana, you have the traditional title registration process. But if you're in the village, unless the chief approves it, your government registration is meaningless, right? So you have these dual systems that work together with the formal versus the traditional informal mechanisms to manage risks. So in Somalia, you have power companies, right? These little companies that put up grids, and they have big generators and sell power to housing. They have ways of collecting on those bills. They have lending and all these. And those institutions, local traditional institutions that pre-existed colonial times and now are really the major institutions that are driving commerce, I think should be encouraged, enabled, and brought to the forefront to institutionalize the risk management process. There's credit reporting bureau. No, you know what? The local elder is the credit reporting bureau. Yeah. So that's just my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to say anything?
I just want to say that actually we have a series of experience. We have investments in a sanitation company, which is a public utility, a couple of energy grids. We have a bunch of experience on a lot of that actually from Shuraako for the purpose of understanding it from the inside as an investor, what the real constraints are. But we can get into that a little bit later. I think that we're going to take, what, two more questions?
One or two right here. Go ahead.
And then, thanks, you guys. As long as you don't mind staying, we'll keep going.
Okay. My name is Nazara. I spent about 10 years in the public sector here. It's nice to be here because about 10 years ago I was running around here as an undergraduate student. So thank you to Dr. Riddle for the invitation. It brings back memories. Two questions. I used to work in MCC, so we love capacity development recommendations. When the USG is based in Nairobi, I can sense that it's really difficult to capacitate local partners. For implementers, we've done pricing proposals. We do this all around Somalia, not in Somalia. Can maybe Jeffrey or maybe others, can you guys speak to when physically the U.S. government will be in Somalia? Because I think that's a confidence marker. That's one way to manage risk, and I think that would be very good for the public, businesses and otherwise. My second question is, and I like, John, your company's name. The diaspora has several strings. We have the one that pull us to Somalia, and we have the ones that pull us here. I've spent 7 years in the MCC as a public service employee. So how can we think about the diaspora in sort of managing its talents elsewhere, perhaps here at home, and not just forward or going back home? So those are my two general questions. Thank you.
To answer the first question is I can't answer it. You actually, the desk officer for Somalia was here, Mohammed Williams, and he left. So I'm not sure. But that's really I think a question. I guess there are security concerns. I mean, you work for government, you know, and the security threat is very high. And you know, we've all now got to take these new courses for whatever we have to do, and basically there's a lot of travel that's not even being done. So the answer to the questions, I don't know, but I'm sure it's certainly in the planning phase. If there are probably TDYs allowed in certain areas for the temporary travel, and I do know, you know, that the land is still intact. I mean, USAID had a big complex there, and the embassy grounds were still there. So I would guess in a few years, but I really don't know. Mohammed could have told you. You can, yeah, I'm sure. Not too.
I can share a couple things. We just recently had a forum in Hargeisa, and the U.S. Embassy was there. Now they do travel in and out. And also, I'll say the new USAID project that was just funded. Actually, the mandate, part of their offices have to be in and are in Mogadishu. So, I mean, there are actually inroads into putting efforts into the country, and I think demonstrating that. That's not an official answer. I'm just my observation.
Yeah.
So you're right. We have a temporary rotational basis that goes into Mogadishu.
Yeah.
Facility at the time, but we are making plans to be permanent. Nominated a U.S. ambassador that hopefully will be confirmed by the Senate next month. So that's a huge milestone for us, and the planning process is underway.
So, are we going to wrap it up?
I think, yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. Hussein, do you have one last thing that we can keep it very, 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 very concise?
Everyone, actually, my name is Hussein Ahmed. My question is direct. Somalis, they want to see who's working with them. I want to know, the parties are here, when they're going to have office like Shuraako. Shuraako put together represent Somali to you. When are you going to take effective after reports? USAID, I know you're there.
Yeah, I can answer that one quickly. SITE's model is that we do not establish offices unless, of course, USAID or the State Department wants to give us a whole heck of a lot of money to do so. And what's the reason? We work through local partnerships, right? We don't expect to know everything about how to do business in Somalia. Who knows better than the local chambers and associations? So what we worked through, before it was popular, a partnership model. And what we do is we provide financial support, technical assistance, and sharing of best practices. So when we talk about, we have an office here in Washington, and most of us are on the road pretty much every month or every other month going to different projects and partners around the world based upon the need. When we talk about changing rules and regulations, when we talk about working in terms of improving the business investment climate, these are not things that happen on a daily basis in terms of change. The change comes slowly in any country of the world, including the United States. And so along those lines, it's critically important, instead of having international development experts come in and pretend to try to tell Somalis on how best to run their country and to do different development projects, it's better to really use a partnership model and work with local partners on that.
Any possibility of an AmCham being started soon?
We were just talking about AmChams the other day with regards to Africa. And while I can't really speak on behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the AmChams are really demand-driven. Essentially, there has to be a sufficient number of local companies that want to go through the process of starting an AmCham, and then they put in a formal application to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. U.S. Chamber of Commerce doesn't frequently, in terms of the AmChams, go out and say, well, okay, we're going to plant our flag as an AmCham here. So it has to be, and for that to happen, there have to be a sufficient number of really multinational investors going, and companies going into different, and U.S. companies going into different markets.
Explain to the group what that is.
So an American Chamber of Commerce is an affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they're certified by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They have to go through a whole series of hoops in terms of proving that they have clearly they're issue driven, that they're going to engage in advocacy, but also that they're well governed. And who makes up those AmChams as U.S. Chambers of Commerce overseas are truly local and multinational companies. And they're not financed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They actually give the U.S. Chamber of Commerce money. They're financed locally in different countries. So you'll find them in typically, let's say, in Africa, you'll find them in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, et cetera.
I think we're going to wrap it up with that. And thank you all for your interest. If you go to the Shuraako website, we have under the Forums tab, we have the Somali Investment Forum agenda, which have tied to it sessions that are videotaped and audio taped. We have a Somali Renewable Energy Forum that were audio taped and videotaped, and all the presentations are there. So when we were talking about how we're bringing this all back together to donor coordinate, we actually are, as an initiative, trying to keep that donor coordination going and model this through. So you can go back and look at that, and we'll have this videotaped. It is videotaped, so all of the blunders are there. And the great comments that you all made. So thank you all very much. Hopefully now you have an appetite for the full report. June 16th, we'll expect you in London. Right? Thanks.